Okay, yeah, my name is Floyd Zobel, and I was born in northern Iowa, a little bit of town called Fertile, Iowa. And then, but it was on a farm. We didn't live in town. We was on a farm, and so actually I was kind of born and raised on a farm. But then, when I was 17, I lost my dad, and we got off the farm, and I went to work for Ender's Tool Company up in Alberta, Minnesota. And I worked there until almost before I went into service. At the time I went into service, I was 20 years old. I had my 21st birthday in the service. And before I went in, though, I did do a little part-time work there at well, it's actually a packing plant up in Alberta, Minnesota. And then we moved to Mason City, Iowa, where I also did some more work in a filling station just before I went into service. And then from then on, you want my service connection now, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was drafted, but when I went in, instead of going just in the regular army, I volunteered for the paratroops, and we went from Fort Snelling, that was in Minnesota, and we went on down to Toccoa, Georgia, where we started doing a little basic training, but more or less just to acquaint ourselves with the service. And I'll never forget it, because when we first got down there, they had us, and it had been raining, and we had big overcoats on because it was in February and it was cold when we left Minnesota, and they had us do push-ups in that red mud down in Toccoa. So I'll never forget that. And then from Toccoa, after we were just there a short time, and we went up to Camp McCall, North Carolina, and there we were doing what we called a basic training for just several weeks at that time, because we were preparing to be ready to go to jump school, which was at Fort Benning, Georgia. So then when we went down to Fort Benning, we spent 3 weeks there. The first week we spent just packing our chutes. We had to pack our own chutes at that time. And then we started with the jump towers and all the different mock tower stuff like that to learn how to jump. Then the final week, and you had to make 5 jumps before you qualified for the paratroops. So the final week is when we did our jumps. And what we would do is we would go up in the plane, and they would give us the order to stand up and hook up, because we had what they called an anchor line snap fastener that we would hook onto a cable in the plane. So when we jumped out of the plane, we didn't have to pull our ripcord. It was automatically pulled out our backpack at that time. And we did that for 5 times. And after we'd completed the 5 jumps, then we got our wings, we got our boots, because at that time we were pretty proud of our boots. They were pretty well shined up, and everybody knew that you were the paratroop. And of course, being young, we were kind of proud of that at the time. But anyhow, then we went back to Camp McCall, North Carolina, and we'd spent 13 weeks total in what we call basic training. And that's doing bivouac out in the fields, living just, you might say, in the pastures, and we had pup tents at the time. Well, during that time, though, I had one of my men was supposedly AWOL, and he'd gone on a leave, and he didn't get back to camp, so they sent myself and another sergeant there at that time to New York, to Governor's Island they called it, and we went out and received the prisoner and brought him back then to camp. Then shortly after that, after we had completed our training there at Camp McCall, which was mostly just basic training, a lot of close order drill, and learning the outs and ins of the paratroops at that time. So then we went to a place called Camp Polk, Louisiana. And while in Camp Polk, we prepared then to go overseas. That was mainly our training when we was in Camp Polk. We had a lot nicer barracks when we got to Camp Polk than we did when we were in Camp McCall, because they were just tar paper shacks at that time in Carolina. And then after we'd spent, I don't just recall how many weeks in Camp Polk, and then we loaded on to a troop train, and they took us to San Francisco. And actually it was Pittsburgh, California was actually the town, And there again, all we did was wait for our orders to be shipped overseas. And when we did that, we went to Oakland, California, and boarded the ship at that time called the Sea Pipe, which was a very, very poor ship, believe me. There was 5,000 of us on this ship, and we weren't going to have an escort going over because we were heading for New Guinea. So every 2 minutes we'd change course because we didn't have an escort with us to protect us at that time. And then the bad part about that was there were so many of us that we only had 2 meals a day. And when you would come up to eat, you stood up to eat because with a canvas topped iron structure that you just stood up to eat. But the bad part there was some people weren't feeling too good, and so it wasn't too healthy a place really to be eating at that time. But anyway, after 27 days, then we arrived at New Guinea. And in New Guinea, we lived in what they call a pyramidal tent. And so in order to enlarge it, we would pull the sides out and we built a framework around our tent, so we had a lot more room. And then we built a structure within the middle of the plane so we could throw our duffel bags and so on, things like that we weren't going to be carrying. Well, during that time in New Guinea, we did a lot more training for combat because we would run different tactics in the woods, and they would, and actually rated us on that too. So the only thing that I did wrong there, we did too good a job on our exercise, and I was a lead-off man when we got into the Philippines to lead the squad into combat. But anyway, so then when we left New Guinea, one thing nice about that, we got on what they call the Cavalier, which was a much better ship than just the Navy, and it was a Coast Guard actually what it was, and we actually got 3 meals a day there, and it was good food. It was real good food. So it got a chance to fatten us up a little bit before we got into combat. Well, anyway, then when we got up to Okinawa, actually, oh wait a minute, excuse me, before we didn't go to Okinawa at that time. We landed in an island called Leyte, which was in the Philippines. And that was about 65 miles south of the main island of Luzon, which the main city there, the capital, was Manila. So well, actually, when we were in the Philippines, we took off from Mindoro flying because we landed, we jumped into Tagaytay Ridge, which was in Leyte, which is in the Philippines. Well, after jumping, then we met in different spots there, and that's when I landed in a tree at that time, and I had to get cut out by the Filipinos. Thank goodness they were Filipinos. And we met and we did some guard posts away from where we landed, and at that time, we landed right in the middle of enemy territory. And I won't give you the number because there was quite a few, but we landed in the middle, and we did, they thought at the time we were going to take that easy route up to where they were because we were surrounded by the Japanese at that time, but we didn't. We took the rough way out, and we kind of caught them, as they say, with their pants down, so to speak. And then we had about 65-mile run, which we shuttled. We would ride so far on the trucks, and then we would get out, and then we would walk so far. And as we got closer to, well, when we went up to what they called Barawan, then they had us go across what they called Ormoc Pass, which was to Ormoc Bay. Ormoc Bay was held by the Japanese at that time, and they were also in the island of Leyte. So our job was to go across, clearing out all that territory